Hi, I'm Prof E, and this is Prof E Plays. So, I have a little bit a new type of video here I'm doing, which I'm thinking of as kind of a recap of D&D sessions that I play with my kids. Right, so this started several months ago. My two oldest kids, my 12-year-old and my 10-year-old, come to me and say, "Dada, we want to play D&D." Now, I have played role-playing games with them before, but never Dungeons and Dragons. I want to try to keep things simpler. So, like, we tried playing some Fate-based stuff. We tried playing some Ironsworn-based stuff. And then with the oldest, I played some index card RPG, that kind of thing, where I thought this is a good introduction, while at the same time is like avoiding some of the complexities that might be a bit much, right, for them just kind of getting into role playing. But Dungeons and Dragons is such a big thing. My wife plays on a fairly regular basis. My wife and I played together in a game run by my sister-in-law. Wife's sister was the DM for, so they're very aware of D&D. They want to play D&D. So I finally said, okay, fine, right, I will play D&D for you, or with you. So, but the big stipulation here is that I'm going to be the DM because I live in a household where everybody wants to run the game. Their actually first introduction was a game by Monte Cook called No Thank You Evil, and there the big source of conflict is who gets to be the one running the game and telling the story, right? So that's the big provision. Dad is going to be the DM, and they accepted this, right? So then I had to plan a campaign. Right, so I thought, well, I'm going to use the tools available to me. So I pull out the Dungeon Master's Guide and I flip through some of the setup kind of stuff, and I do some rolling. And what I found was that from these random rolls, I started developing this kind of world story where what's happening, right, is that in the background, right, the demons in their plane, right, are trying to overtake the gods in their plane. That's the goal. But naturally, it's going to be a process, and level one characters run by a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old are not going to be directly involved to start out. Right. So what do we do? Right, so, okay. So the implications of this, right, is we're going to see lots of undead. So these skeletons, right, low level kind of monsters where you don't have any like significant um, moral dilemmas or anything like that. You can smash the zombie's head. That's fine, right? Break the skeleton to pieces. Fine. It's already dead, right? So there's no moral problem with this, right? So okay, this is a good way to get them started. And naturally, traditionally, we are going to start in a village. So I have this little village of Willowell. That's where they start. Now, with some of the world building, I decided to pull in because I wasn't totally satisfied with what the Dungeons and Master's Guide gave me. So I pulled in some of the advice from another game, right, Worlds Without Number, which you can get. There's a free version of that that you can get through DriveThru RPG. So that's what I did. Right, so I pulled that out. I went through some of the world building processes that they suggested, came up with actions, that kind of thing. So in this video, then, I want to give you a little bit of an overview of kind of what that world looks like and also what my son's characters are. Right, so already mentioned, demons are trying to rise to overthrow the gods. And what we actually see of that, that my kids are actually going to be interacting with at a relatively low level, is lots of undead around, so zombies, ghosts, and the like. Also, cults. I decided that dark cults would be reasonable to have that exist. Temples getting burned down, right? The more good aligned priests getting murdered, that kind of thing. And so that's the kind of theming that I decided I wanted to have. Right now, my players, my 12-year-old decided that he wanted to play a dragon-blooded wizard. Right, so I had them roll up their stats, and his rolls weren't great, but they were good enough for a wizard. Right, he has fairly high intelligence, that kind of thing. Right, and he decided to name his character Isaac the Cold-Blooded Killer. Okay, that's an interesting name, especially for somebody whose alignment I'm trying to remember is lawful good. Yeah, he's a lawful good wizard named Isaac the Cold-Blooded Killer, and apparently the reason that he's called that is in his backstory, right? he has been falsely accused of killing the king. So the cold-blooded killer is apparently not what he calls himself, what other people have labeled him, because he has been falsely accused of killing the king. Right now, my 10-year-old decided that he wanted to also play a dragonborn, and so he is also dragonborn, but he's a sorcerer. Yes, I have a wizard and a sorcerer as my two-player characters, first level. And if you know Dungeons and Dragons, you know where this is going to end up going. Lots of death saves, yes. Yes. We've played about 11 sessions at this point. I want to say almost all of them have involved death saves. And if they haven't, it's because they just didn't get far enough to get into a combat. Okay. Anyway, right, so he has Balasar, and it turns out Balasar is the prince, right? So, fun fact: the king actually, well, Isaac the Cold-Blooded Killer was falsely accused of killing the king. Um, it turns out the king wasn't actually ever killed, which is great. It's just fantastic backstory. So anyway, so they are not in the capital; they're in this tiny little village of Willowell when things open up. All right. Right. So anyway, so just a little bit more of the background of what's going on in the world. I'm going through my notes here. I decided to use a note-taking technique that I learned from Kelsey over at Arcane Library. She designed the game Shadow Dark, right? And she shared how she does her um, notebooks, which is really awesome, actually. As somebody who like has done some bullet journaling in the past, it makes perfect sense to me. So the basic idea is that you have the first couple pages being about kind of your campaign overview, and that's also where you would summarize where the sessions happen. Right, then you have a couple pages right, devoted to your players. Then a couple pages devoted to your player characters, right? So that's where I can record things like what's their AC, right? What's their initiative? These kinds of things. How many XP do they have? It's something I track for my kids because I don't want them to have to worry about it, that kind of thing. Right. And then NBCs would be the next one. So I decided that I really like the faction system and specifically the faction turn system in Worlds Without Number. Right, so I had to design some factions. So the factions I decided to start out in the town that they were in, we had on the one hand there was kind of an evil cult, right, that was insinuating itself, and also then causing direct problems as well, as we'll see in one of the later sessions. We also have the temple. I decided that I didn't particularly like getting too specific with the gods, so I wasn't going to like have some kind of Greek pantheon or anything like that. Instead, on the good side, it's just light. So it's something somewhat abstracted, right? So I'm imagining something roughly monotheistic like, right? So it's the Order of Light is the good religious group, and then you have right the demon and devil cults that would be around as well. That would be the evil ones. Then you also have there was a vault which had become I guess inhabited by orcs, bugbears, right, goblins, right. These types of things had moved in right to that lair. And then you also had kind of the official like Willowell like mayor and the like, right? So you have all of these different groups existing there to start out. Okay, right? So that's the groundwork. Now I want to give you kind of a sense of how things have gone. Right? I wasn't sure how long this would be. I have plenty of time at this point. It's an 8-minute video so far, right? So I'll tell the story of Willowell. So the first session, we mostly spent time like getting characters made, that kind of thing, or getting backstories put together. Right? And then I thought, given like the set of people, we're going to go ahead and have zombies attack. Right? So they have zombies that they have to deal with, right? And I think that in the first session they didn't actually fight the zombies yet. Instead, they were just aware that the zombies existed. The mayor of the town, a halfling named Mysterio, speaking with a British accent because it's like one of the only voices that I can do is speaking with a British accent. Right? Uh, okay, somebody's attacking sheep. That's it. And they eventually trace and find that whatever it is that's attacking the sheep, these are creatures that live in some cave that is outside of the town. Right. So that's where they end. So they end getting ready to go into this cave. So in this cave, the cave is inhabited, right, somewhat by zombies and skeletons, right? So they go in, they fight the zombies and the skeletons, and they eventually have to flee, if I recall correctly, in that session. This was a while ago. That's just session number two. Was quite some time ago. All right. Right, so okay, yeah. So how this went? No, they didn't. They didn't flee. Now that I remember, so they went in. Things were going badly, right? So they did end up fleeing, right? But what they did, and I gave them credit for this one actually. They decided, 'cause since all of these skeleton zombies and the like were in the cave, well, we can solve this problem. It's a fairly small cave entrance. Just blow it up. This is what they did, right? They exploded the cave entrance, caused a cave in, right? Which meant, of course, they didn't get any treasure. So there's treasure inside this cave they could have gotten. It was literally just sitting there because they were in the cave before they had to leave and collapse the thing. And they just left it, right? So they didn't get any treasure from that, but they did at least deal with the skeleton zombie problem at that point. However, more skeletons and zombies can come because we have an evil necromantic cult that is raising zombies and skeletons. Right? So we have another problem. Oh, cattle getting attacked again. Right? So skeletons are showing up. They fight them in a stall. There are definitely death saves being made here. Because it turns out, one thing that because I'm a relatively new DM actually, and in my like I ran some like old World of Darkness stuff like 20 years ago, right? So running Dungeons and Dragons, it's not how I learned to game. It's not really something that I know very well, right? So there's some amount of adjustment that goes on, right? So I'm trusting the formulas, right, in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Big mistake, of course. All right, so I trust all the formulas. I'm making what I think are going to be hard encounters for them because I want them to work for it, but I don't want them to die. Right? Instead, they just die. Fortunately, right, I never had the point where both of them were out at the same time. Right. So the way it normally plays out is my older son is the one that will just kind of rush in, and then my 10-year-old is the one that will tend to hold back. Right. So the older one rushes in, gets loses all of his hit points, is knocked cold, and then the other one right rushes in and drags him out. Of course, I can't convince them that maybe if they both go in, that they have more of a chance. No, my 10-year-old doesn't believe that. Okay. Anyway, so this is how things have tended to go. All right. So they caused this cave in. It was great, wonderful. Okay. And that deals with the undead for now. Right. So I think maybe that might be a good place to stop. So at this point, right, what has happened? Right. So we have the prince in exile, effectively. We don't actually know that he has any kind of conflict with his family, just for some reason, right? He is not there. Uh, there might be something in his backstory that I'm forgetting, but I don't remember it. And Isaac, the cold-blooded killer, our sorcerer and wizard combo, right, hanging out in the little village of Willowell, right, causing cave-ins to deal with undead. Right. That's what we got, and that is what the first four sessions involved. Was all kind of dealing with that problem. Okay, so I think I'm going to break the video here. Some other time that I have time, I'll talk about how the next step went. Right. So first they're dealing with the undead creatures that lived in the cave. The next thing they're going to be dealing with, just so you know what's coming, right, is the bugbears and goblins and orcs that are in the vault. Right. Then there's an evil cult for them to deal with. Right, so now before we get too far, I will say one thing that I've learned. Now here I'm kind of fast forwarding a bit to what I've learned now, having run 11 sessions for them. One is that given their play style and all of our skills, I'm running medium encounters for them most of the time. And that seems to work reasonably well, in that my oldest son makes death saves and the younger one can save him. That's a balance that they've stricken. Um, so anyway, right, so that's one thing I've learned. Another thing I've learned, which I don't think my kids have learned, is that sorcerers and wizards, if you put them in an enclosed space, do terribly. They're not close quarters fighters, right? Now you have spells that are good at 120 feet. Try to stay at the 120 feet away, right? Is kind of the goal of such spells. Right. Right. So that is something that I have found is that, and naturally, like I as the DM, and you always want to be like a fan of your players and their characters, which means that I had to figure out that putting these two characters in actual enclosed dungeons does not work very well if I want them to succeed. I have to make sure they have real easy encounters because that's not how it's going to work. On the other hand, if I take them and I put them in a much more open space, so I have them out in the forest or something like that, they tend to do a lot better. And that's not surprising, but because they have things that operate at range, give them a nice wide range so that they can, attack something from far away before it has much of a chance to attack them. Then the fact that they have very few hit points doesn't matter so much because they have the range so they can get some hits in before we end up having to like enter melee combat or something like that. So it's all a learning process, right? Also, as part of this learning process, one thing that I found is that m my kids often forget their own abilities. Like, one thing that happened, one of the very early fights actually went really easily for them. I had forgotten this till right now. Like, one of the extremely early fights went really easily, and the reason for that was that they used their breath weapons all the time because the Dragonborns, they have fire-breathing kind of stuff. I forget what it is. I think one of them is an acid-based attack, the other one's a fire-based attack. In any case, right, so they have these natural weapon attacks that they can use, and they use them all the time because I didn't realize, I hadn't made good notes at that point. This was something that they can use like once or twice, right, before they have to take a long rest or maybe a short rest. But at the very least, you can't spend the whole combat breathing fire at people. That's not something you can do with your species feature. Right, so, my mistake. Right, so then the next one was significantly harder because I said, "Oh, I made a mistake last time. You can only use this once or twice or whatever the rule actually is. I need to review that again. It's been a while since we played." Right. Uh, and it went it's much harder. And I said, "Well, what do you think happened?" They said, "Well, we weren't allowed to use our breath weapons all the time." Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Right, so we're all kind of learning the rules, and what has happened since then is that I believe that my kids have forgotten they even have breath weapons because we haven't played very frequently. So, oh well. But anyway, right, so at this point, I think I am going to stop here um, with just some last comments. So I will say that I am really enjoying, right, playing Dungeons and Dragons with my 12-year-old and 10-year-old. It's a good time, right? It's something that like we all kind of enjoy the process of it. The only real challenge is weird as it is to say, because you would think we live in the same house, right? We should be able to find times to play. But that's remarkably difficult to do. And a lot of it is because when given the choice, right, they would prefer to play something on their computers rather than a tabletop role playing game. It's fun. And we do this all for fun. Right. So the only real time that we have that we can do it is if we're limiting their screen time, which we do. We do limit that to some degree, right? But where they don't have something else they have to do, right? Which is a problem, say in the evenings, right? So usually what happens, they'll come home from school and say, okay, you can have a couple hours of screen time, and then we break for dinner. After dinner, we do homework, and then like we'll watch like one episode of a TV show and go to bed, that kind of thing, right? So there's not time in there. Certainly not time for. Normally I keep the sessions short with them because they're 10 and 12, right? Right, so hour and a half, that kind of thing. But finding that kind of chunk between dinner and bedtime is hard to do, especially when we're trying to do other things as well, like making sure everybody's ready for bed, right? That kind of thing. Right, so it's hard to do. So often what will happen is that like the only real time we have for it is say Sunday we get home from church, there's this gap, right, between lunch and screen time, that's when we can play. And if anything else is going on, we lose that. Right. So that's something that weirdly, despite the fact that you'd think we would be able to play more often, that's proving to be a challenge. All right. Anyway, so as I said like 10 minutes ago, I guess I'll end the video here. This is Prof E, just giving a little D&D overview of the first few sessions of what it's like, right, playing D&D with my kids. Some thoughts related to that. I'll do a couple more of these to get you caught up, and then maybe provide session by session updates as we actually get a chance to play. Okay. All right, that's my hope. So anyway, Prof E, signing off.